Okay, so today we're going to talk about solving polynomial inequalities with a graphing calculator. So the main difference between equalities and inequalities is that before we've been only dealing with things with an equal sign, and now we are dealing with things with a not necessarily equal sign, but maybe a greater than or a less than sign, okay? And so the way to solve these is actually very similar to the way to solve the equalities all the way up until the last step. We do the same thing all the way until the last step. So first thing I'm going to do here is pass everything over to one side through addition and subtraction. And so I've got 2x to the third plus x squared, and then I'll do minus 6x minus 2 is greater than or equal to 0. Alright, so you want to get it set up like this, basically. Alright, and now what we want to do is we want to take and we want to graph this. Alright, I'm going to go on my graphing calculator here, which is here on my computer, and notice I have right there in the bottom the 2x to the third times x squared minus 6 minus 2. Okay, and now I am going to hit the graph button, and the graph will appear right there. And now what we do is we go and use the 0 function, which I believe is under F5 for mine, and then I go down to 0, hit enter, and then remember I've got to get my lower bound and upper bounds here. I'm going to do this 3 times. So I'm going to do my lower bound and my upper bound, and I get my 0 as a negative 1.21. And I'll write that down on my piece of paper. Then I'll go and do 0 function again. Here, and they're already set up for my upper bound, or my lower bound. Now I'm going to do the upper bound, and I get a 0 of negative 0.334. And I write that on my paper. And then I hit F5 again, go to 0. I'm already set up for my lower bound, which I'll move to there anyway. And so that way it's a little more clear. And, there, let's go back one. There's my upper bound. And sure enough, I get positive 1.38. 1.38. Okay. And I'll go now back down to my page. What I'll do is I'll also actually draw this graph on the page here you don't need to do this. I'll just do it for our purposes in this, so we can have some explanation here. So I've just drawn a quick sketch of the graph. It's not perfect, but it will do for what we're doing here. Okay, so what I've done is I've found out where the zeros are. What this does is it tells me when the x values that this polynomial is equal to 0, here, here, and here. And so these are actual solutions, because notice I have greater than or equal. notice this is greater or equal. So these are actually solutions to the problem. But I want to know when the polynomial is greater than 0. And if I look at the graph here, and I sort of focus in on this interval here, and this interval here going off until forever, that's when my polynomial is actually greater than 0. Because right here, my polynomial is less than 0. Right here, my polynomial is greater than 0. And so this entire interval, I will qualify for greater than 0. And this entire interval, I will qualify for greater than 0. And so, fortunately, I know these numbers. This is negative 1.2 right here, negative 1.2. This is negative 0.3. And this one is 1.38. So I can actually write the interval in which they're greater than 0. So you would write this interval that x is greater than 0 between, when it's between these, the polynomial is greater than 0 when x is between these two values. So we could say f of x is greater than 0 when x is between or is greater than or equal to 0. And I kind of write it like this: when x is between or equal to these two numbers, negative 1.2 and negative 0.33. All right, let's round it off to that. And so you see that when that is the case, okay. Or we also need to cover this interval over here. So we could say f of x is greater than 0 when x is between these two, or when x is greater than 1.38, or when x is greater than or equal to 1.38. Notice there's if I have an equal to right there in my original equation, then all of my intervals will have an equal to in my answer. If I do not have an equal to in my original equation, then none of these will have an equal to. Okay? And so that's basically the idea there. These are actually pretty simple equations to solve. They are nice though, because you get to actually see it happen on the graph. And so you start to begin to realize, what does it mean to be equal to 0, greater than 0, graphically, and things like that. All right? And so that is solving polynomial inequalities with a graphing calculator.